Welcome back to another reading and correcting of Bottom Rung. With me, Kindar, Tiger Rights, and Ty, the Tiger Supervisor. Today, we are doing Chapter 2. Tibs ran out of breath, slowing to a walk, following the path of now trampled grass. He could take a better look. Oh, okay. Tibs ran out of breath. Slowing to a walk, following the path of now trampled grass, he could take a better look at the tents. They were large, hastily put up, and far from the stone platform where he'd arrived. A series of signs caught his attention. A sword, a bow, a hand with sparks around it, and a hand reaching into a pouch. Each had an arrow indicating further along the trampled path that wound between the platform and the tents. He peered into one tent in passing, row and row of cots. Another, first thing he caught was the set of food, then noticed the tables and the cooks at the back. His stomach growled, but he didn't enter. He didn't want to risk another of the adventurer guarding them, finding him where he had no business. He passed tents with displays set up, slowed, looking at what they showed: armor, weapons, ropes, bandages. Adventuring equipment, Tibs realized. He looked around for anyone watching him. It wasn't like anyone would miss any, was it? You! A woman in armor called to him. Their eyes met. What are you doing? She wore armor like the ice adventurer, with a sword on her belt. Her eyes were deep green, and she didn't look happy. Forgot about the bandages as she took a step in his direction, and he ran. He only stopped on the other side of the tent encampment, with more symbols drawn on planks, and hurried to look around for the guard. He expected her to be right behind him. Only saw more people like him going to the left and right of the signs. They were the same sword, bow, hand with sparkle, and hand with fingers in a pouch. This time the arrows for the sword and bow pointed to the left, while the one for the sparks and pouch pointed to the right. You don't know where to go, the woman said, and Tibs nearly ran away in fright as her hand landed on his shoulder. Go with the fighters. Her green eyes looked him over. How old are you? Shrugged, trying to pull away. Are you sure you're with this bunch and you aren't one of the workers' kids? He pulled harder, but she didn't even seem to notice his effort. She let go and he staggered. He glared at her and she chuckled. Fighters are that way, she indicated to the right. I'm going that way, he pointed. She indicated the left, he pointed to the right. Sit yourself. Watch where you put those fingers, kid. Be a shame for you to lose them so early in your life. She turned and walked away. He walked by a man in red and gold robes who eyed him suspiciously, standing next to the sign with the hands on the hand with the hands and sparkles. A woman, only older than Tibs, stepped to the man. He had her hold. Stepped to the man. He had her hold a crystal before nodding and directing her to the group beyond. The man leveled his suspicious gaze on Tibs as he tried to figure out what they were doing, and when sparks appeared on the tip of the man's fingers, Tibs moved on. Do I say the eye color of the man? Him suspiciously. Leveled gaze on Tibs. The man standing tried to figure out what they were doing. When sparks appeared on the tips of the man's fingers, Tibs moved on. The man standing next to the sign with the hands and a pouch was a few years older than Tim, and a thief. He had no doubt of that. And a thief, he had no doubt of that. The way those stone gray eyes looked at anyone walking by. The two casual way his hands were folded together. He was successful by the quality of his clothing, but Tibbs was sure he'd pick his pocket if there was anything in them. Move on, kid. Go back to your parents, he said, sounding bored. I'm one of them, replied defiantly, indicating the people beyond that man. Where did he get off calling? Couldn't he tell he was a thief too? Maybe he should dip his fingers in those pockets and keep whatever he pulled out of show him. Really? The man said with a snort. Go ahead, pick my pocket. He watched the man's face and only saw mocking dismay. He looked around for guards and wondered how he'd do it. Don't worry about them. He looked the men over. No. Tried to pass him. The man stepped before him. You're not going in unless you do it. Get out of my way, Tibs demanded. Not happening unless you pick my pocket. Tibs shoved the man, who barely took a step. I can't do that when you know I'm going to do it. He shoved him again, harder, his fingers slipping in the jacket's pocket in the process. The man staggered out of his way and Tibs stepped past him, something hard and angled in his hand. A coin. The hand on his shoulder stopped him before he reached the group. Some of the men and women at the back turned to watch the exchange, and turned to Tibs, and he prepared himself for the blow. When it didn't come, he opened an eye. The man's gray eyes were leveled on him, amusement. That was actually pretty good, considering how young you are. The shoving was a clever distraction under the circumstance. Now, open your hand and show me what you took. It's considered proclaiming his innocence. He could flick whatever he held away before bringing his hand forward. But the man's eyes weren't focused on Tibs. They flicked around his face, his hands, and to the left and right of them. It's figured the man missed nothing. He opened his hand. He held a crystal, like the one the man in the robe had handed the woman. It was clear with a few cracks in it, not particularly valuable, he thought. The man took it from him. Go on, burn them. Tibs made his way to the front. This time he wanted to see whoever did the talking. Around him, he made out thieves and beggars, as well as a few older ones. He was sure had been enforcers before. They should be with fighters, not here. What do you get caught on? Someone asked in a whisper. Breaking in a house, was the whispered answer. Stealing bread, whispered another. Fingers in a pocket. Another. Me too. Coming out of a house with rotten pears in my hands. He just felt eyes on him, and he glanced to see a woman in rags looking at him expectantly. Wanted him to add to the conversation. Pockets, he added, not bothering to whisper. Those around him nodded knowingly. Picking pockets was the simplest way to survive the street if you were talented enough. And the fact they had both hands showed that they all had been, even if, like him, they hadn't been good enough not to be caught this one time. A tall and regal woman stepped before them. She wore some sort of cloth armor, heavy-looking shirt and pants in pale green. Her hair was long, so black that it seemed to form a hole around her head and shoulder. Her eyes were strange. The color in them seemed to shift as she moved. She looked them over and took a step back under the gaze, which seemed to amuse her. My name is Tirania, she said in a soft but strong voice. Shuddered. The image of her suffocating with a pillow came. That soft voice soothing him as she killed him. You don't know me, but I am the only person in this entire... Tib thought she was looking for the right word, but instead, she lost the fight for control as her face became a master of disgust. Town. You need to concern yourself with. I am the final authority regarding what happens to those of you who will survive the coming trials. I am the one you need to impress. Proceed further. She walked to one side of the large group, then the other, looking them over, frowning and nodding. She paused slightly as she looked Tibs over, who was a good head and a half smaller than anyone around him, before continuing. You called yourself, light fingers, pickpockets, log breakers, rough artists, thieves, he said with disgust, and many other fancy names that made you feel better about being the waste of space that you were. She stopped, fixed her gaze on a woman in the process of opening her mouth. You'd been worthy of a better title, Ternia said. You wouldn't be here. Wouldn't have been caught. She returned to the center of the clearing, her hands behind her back, and looked them over. You are among the fortunate who get a chance to speed through the hardship most of our kind need to go through to earn the noble title of rogue. She paused, seemed to expect something, continued. Others will do their best to convince you the rogue is the least important member of any group. That all you're interested in is getting the larger proportion of the reward. That greed is all that drives you. Don't listen to them. She waved dismissively. Without you, no group can survive a dungeon, not even the simplest, because it is you who will be able to tell if an empty room is filled with traps, if the attacking monsters are there to push you into a tricked corridor, and yes, there is a hidden cubbyhole where more treasure hides. If your party doesn't give you the respect you deserve, feel free not to tell them about that treasure. They won't miss what they don't know is there. Tibs chuckled with the others. He didn't think of himself as a bad person. Picked pockets and broke into houses to survive and for a place to sleep, not to hurt anyone. But he had no problem returning mistreatment of one form with another. On any day you are not going into the dungeon, you will be spending your mornings with a trainer. They will evaluate your skill, then teach you what you need to know to round them up and increase your chances of survival. How often are we going in the dungeon? Someone asked, sounding nervous. That will depend, she answered, not looking at that person. The dungeon is new, so for the first few days, we'll send one team per hour. As it grows, clearing it will take longer. Then there are the number of people here. Teams will be 5 people strong, and as potential rogues, you will be called on to be on each of those teams. You will be rotated, but as more and more people don't exit, those of you still alive will be called on more often. Based on previous dungeons, half of everyone here will be dead within a month. We will not bring anyone new until the dungeon graduates, so take full advantage of this opportunity. Is it true a new dungeon can make someone rich? How many coppers do you need before you consider yourself rich? She replied. He tried to find who asked the question, but while he couldn't, he saw others considering what she said. The answer is, she continued, that if you think coppers are enough for you to be happy with, you aren't right for this class. If copper's enough, go join the fighters right now. She waited, Tibs her shifting, but he didn't think anyone left. The pickings are always horrible the first few days, so hope you're in a later team. Dungeons need some experience to grow enough to provide anything worth mentioning. But even the first team should be able to find a few coppers. But don't get attached. Coins go to the guild. Outrage exploded among the crowd, and Tibs shared it. They were going to do the work, they deserved the coins, but her expression kept him quiet. She was amused. Do you prefer being back in your cell, waiting to lose a hand? This isn't employment, she said harshly. It's an alternative to you dying on the street. What if I don't want to give you what I find? A voice asked, sounding far. The distance provided an illusion of safety, he figured. What are you going to do about it? Me. She shrugged. Nothing. It's the adventurers who will be searching you when you need to worry about. Feel free to try to hide a coin from them if you want. It's good to weed out the idiots early on, and they'll be happy for a reason to work out their angers on you. She waited. Good. Now, I'm not here to indulge you, so don't bother asking more questions. I'm here to tell you what will happen, nothing else. You know about the dungeons and your mornings. During the afternoons, you will assist with the building of the town. Cause problems, I will not hear about them. The guards will deal with you directly and permanently. Your continued survival depends on more than walking out of the dungeon. This is your town now. You will only survive if it does. So don't get in the way of that. She turned and walked away. Waited until the crowd thinned before following. Kid, a man by the sign called to him, indicating the group to the left. You're going there. They joined the group with an older man in worn leather, looking at them in disappointment. He led them away from the others and then distributed locks and other contraptions, demanding they open them or take them apart. Spent the rest of the day working on locks and traps, all under the annoyed attention of the older thief. When they were finally released, the sun was low over the distant tree line. He was wanted to head to the lake he could just make out, but his instructors stopped him. They weren't allowed outside the town. So he turned and headed to the mess hall, where the food was no better than Tibs expected. Then he carried himself to one of the larger tents with cots and fell asleep as soon as he laid down. A commotion woke him in the night. Screams, fighting, then quiet again. In the falling silence, he tried to fall back to sleep. As Tib tried to fall back asleep, he overheard a whispered conversation. A group had tried to run, been caught. He fell asleep considering the implication of there already being fewer people. This concludes Chapter 2 of Bottom Rung. If you are enjoying, please leave a like. If you want to know when the next one is going to be, subscribe and hit the bell. If you want to read the story for free, that's on Royal Road. If you want to support me, on my Patreon, where you can read ahead of the story. If you want to listen to me do these live, it's every Tuesday morning, 8 a.m. Eastern Time. Twitch. The links are in the notes. And with that, I shall wish you a good day.